We make anywhere from $1 million to $1.5 million per month right now, purely from email marketing to people who previously said no to working with us. And here are 3 well-kept secrets that make that happen. And you won't find this anywhere else.
Joining us is my man, Keala Kanae.
Keala Kanae, he takes entrepreneurs on a journey to grow their business.
Tip number 1 is to move the free line.
Did someone say free line?
No, not that kind of line, Sam. And if you're going to do that sort of thing, you're going to be fired, bro. We don't do drugs around here.
Drugs? What are you talking about? I'm in line for the free donuts.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, clean up your act, dude. I mean, you're giving off a vibe.
Yeah, man. I'm vibing.
The help these days. When I say moving the free line, what I mean is to continue to give away more value for free in order to remain competitive in your market. For example, when we first started my courses and coaching business, we started offering a free webinar. Eventually, over time, everybody was promoting a free webinar, so we had to pivot and offer a free PDF. And then we offered the webinar on the thank you page after somebody opted in for that free PDF. Over time, the opt-in rates went down for that. We began to expand on that PDF. We turned it into a 37-page instruction manual. So we repositioned it as an instruction manual. On the landing page, it literally says, on page 7, you'll get this. On page 12, you get this, so on and so forth, to spell out the value of that free PDF. Today, as I'm filming this, we are in the final editing stages of turning that once free PDF into a full-fledged book that I will list on Amazon for $19.95, but I'll still be giving away the digital version for free in exchange for simply an email address. In other words, that's an example of continuing to pivot and add value to our lead magnet in order to increase the amount of people that are willing to give us their email address in exchange for our free offer. All right, tip number 2 is critical. This is email segmentation. Now, before I break down how to segment your list effectively and use those segments, let's first explain why this is so important. See, most people don't realize that there's 4 major things that are going to impact your email deliverability and ensure that you actually get into the inbox. And when I say inbox, I'm talking about skipping, obviously, the spam and junk folders, but even the dreaded promotions tab on Gmail. Now, those 4 things are as follows, and they're in this order. The most important thing is going to be your IP address reputation. This is the reputation that's attached to the server from which that you are sending emails. Now, for most people, this is going to be outside of their control because you're using a shared IP address, meaning that there are multiple people sending emails through that same server. So if you're using any of the off-the-shelf solutions, things like Aweber, GetResponse, MailChimp, and a host of others, for the most part, this is outside of your control until you can purchase one of the more enterprise level packages wherein you get a dedicated IP address. Those typically cost thousands of dollars a month, so you'll have to decide on your own when that's a viable option for you. Number 2 is going to be your domain reputation. This is the reputation that's attached to the domain from which you send emails. So yourdomain.com. When you send emails from that domain, over time, all of the ISPs, Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, and all of the others are eventually going to assign a reputation or a score, if you will, to that domain. What they ultimately want to see is that when emails come from that domain, people actually want to get those emails, they engage with those emails, and therefore that is going to increase your domain reputation score. Now, after domain reputation, number 3 is content. It's what is the content of your emails. So you got to make sure that you're not saying things like Viagra or how to get rich quick or any of the other spam trigger words or phrases that are going to land you in the obvious spam folders. And lastly are the links that you include in your emails. So any URL that you attach into your email is also going to have its own reputation. This is why it's important that you not use any of the regular commercial URLs. If you grab an affiliate link from ClickBank or you use a regular link shortener like Bitly or TinyURL, well, other people are sending out those links in their emails as well. And so you're going to be impacted by their email practices. So you want to make sure that all of the links that you include in your emails are links that you control so that you can control the reputation. Now, it should be said that these work in a hierarchy, meaning the higher that your IP reputation, the more that you can get away with in your content or the URLs that you send out. The higher your domain reputation, the same is also true. So you want to optimize from the top down, of course, depending on what you have actual control over. Now that you understand why these things are important, let's break down email segmenting and how it plays a role in your overall email deliverability. So I'm going to walk you through how we used segmenting to improve our IP and domain reputation a few years ago and how we continue to use this going forth from here. So first step is we broke our list into multiple segments. We had a 10-day segment, a 30-day segment, a 60-day segment, a 90-day segment, and a 100-day segment. Now, these segments means that everybody in these segments, these are people that have opened within the last 10 days, the last 30 days, the last 60 days, so on and so forth. So if I am emailing the 90-day segment as an example, it's going to include all of those other segments prior to it. If I'm emailing my 30-day segment, it's not going to include the 60, 90-day, and 100-day segments, just so that we're clear. So what we do first is we segment out the list and we create these dynamic rules, meaning that if somebody has opened within the last 10 days, they are going to be in our 10-day segment. If they've opened in the last 30 days, they're in the 30-day segment, so on and so forth. And if somebody hasn't opened in more than 100 days, essentially that means we're going to stop emailing them. Now, the thing that is going to impact your IP and domain reputation most is going to be the open rate, meaning the higher the open rate that you can maintain, the greater your overall reputation. Because again, ISPs, Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, and all of the others ultimately want to see that when you send an email, people actually want to see it and engage with it. The number one metric that they use to determine that is ultimately going to be the open rate. And so what we do is we use these segments to engineer our open rate. Now, in our email marketing strategy, we want to see a minimum of a 25% open rate as an average for the day. If we send out 2 emails that day, the total open rate between those 2 emails must be 50% or greater. That way, when you average it out, it's 25% or greater. If we send 3 emails that day, the same rule applies. The total open rate across those 3 emails must be greater than 75%, so that when we average it out, we know that we have a greater than 25% average open rate. So it's not dependent on how many people emailed, but rather how many email blasts in total were sent. Now, we know that as a general rule, the person who's most likely to open your email is the person who most recently opened your email. The person least likely to open your email is the person who hasn't opened your email in the longest period of time. Therefore, we know that our 10-day segment is going to have the highest open rate, and the 100-day segment is going to have the lowest open rate. So what we did once we segmented our list using these rules is we started to engineer our open rate. First, in the morning, we would send an email to this 10-day segment, and we would see what the overall open rate was. Typically, we can get a greater than 50% open rate on that email. Now, we know that if we are going to send out another email that day, we can take a pretty good amount of risk with that second email that we're going to send out because we already have a 50% open rate to work with. So later that evening, we might send out an email to our 90-day segment, and on that email, we might only get a 10% open rate. Now, when you combine these two, you can see that it's an overall 60% open rate, which averages out to 30%. It meets our daily average. The next day, we might get a bit more risky and send out an email to our 30-day segment in the morning and see what kind of open rate we get there. Let's say that we get about a 30% open rate. Well, we know that we have to be a bit more conservative in our emails that are going out later in the evening because we only have a 30% open rate to work with. So that evening, we might be conservative in our risk and only hit this 60-day segment and get a 20% open rate, which we know still we have averaged 30 plus 20 equals 50%. We've averaged a greater than 25% open rate for the day, meeting our minimum. Now, essentially what we're doing is every day in the morning, we're sending out an email where we can ensure that we're going to get a high open rate. So think of it like reestablishing our email reputation with all of the ISPs that morning. They saw an email come from our IP address and our domain, and it got a greater than 40 or 50% open rate. So they can see that, hey, when we send emails, people must want to see it. Later on that afternoon or evening, we can take a greater risk and email a larger segment of that list and afford to take the risk of having a lower open rate because we're only concerned about the average throughout the day. In other words, we send an email in the morning to a small segment with a high open rate, which gives us the right to take the risk of emailing a larger segment in the afternoon or evening that's going to get a lower open rate. But it protects our IP and domain reputation. And keep in mind that when we email somebody in the 90-day segment and they open an email from us, well, guess what? Once they opened, they're now back in that 10-day segment. And so every day we're mailing a narrow portion of the list to engineer a high open rate. And then we take the risk of emailing a wider sector of the list to scoop people up and bring them back in to that more narrow segment. Doing this ensures that we are keeping email subscribers engaged longer, growing that more narrow segment of the list, that 10 and 30-day segment, so that we are retaining the attention of our list for a longer period of time. Now, once we use this to fix our overall IP and domain reputation, these days we only use our 30 and 100-day segments because that's all that's necessary for us to retain a greater than 60% open rate, a percentage rate that's unheard of by most other marketers in our field. Number 3, having a strategic nurture and promotional cycle. A lot of times when I talk to online entrepreneurs, they're either not emailing their list enough or they're beating their list over the head with the same offer over and over and over again. So let me pull out the whiteboard again really quick and break this down for you. First things first, starting at the top, it's important to understand that the primary way that we acquire customers is by running ads that we push to a webinar. From that webinar, people can buy our offer. And if they buy our offer, they can also then buy a series of upsells. Now, when somebody is in that customer acquisition sequence, they do not receive any other communication from us at all because we don't want to taint the customer acquisition experience. But at the end of that 4 to 5 day campaign, they're going to come out the other end and they are either a buyer or they said no to our original offer. Either way, it's fine with us. Now, it's what we do with those people that originally said no that's important for you to understand in this video. We also have a secondary offer that we promote to our list, and we promote that for about 10 days every month. So we have a promotional offer that we will push out to our list for about 10 days every month. Now, if we are not in that promotional cycle, then that means that for about 20 to 21 days a month, we are pushing people to nurturing content. That means that we are sending them content that is devised to help answer some questions that they might be having or help them solve some aspect of the problem that they're ultimately trying to solve. So what's going to be valuable to your audience is going to be dependent on ultimately what they want to achieve. Now, to give you a peek behind the scenes, that's a big reason why I shoot content here for YouTube, is that way we always have fresh content that we can send out to our audience to keep them nurtured until our next promotional cycle. So the purpose of the nurture component is to keep people opening, keep people engaged, have them see that, hey, we're sincerely trying to help you. And this increases and retains their engagement long enough for us to take a second or even third pass at promoting one of our offers to them. So if somebody comes out of our campaign and we are in a promotional cycle, they might just dump directly into that promotional cycle and start getting hit with our secondary offer. But if they come out of our campaign and we're not in a promotional cycle, they're going to be dumped into our nurture sequence and they're going to be getting these nurture emails from us until we come back around to the next promotional cycle. So the majority of the month, we are sending valuable content out to our list using the segmenting strategy that I talked about in tip number 2. So by launching the strategy, we're no longer playing the game of just gathering attention, i.e. creating leads and subscribers. We're also retaining their attention long enough to eventually monetize it because we're able to take multiple passes at those prospects and potentially turn them into customers. Now, by launching this, we've been able to generate an additional $1 million to $1.5 million per month of revenue from people who previously said no to our offer. Use it. So listen, I hope you got value out of this video, my friend. I'm sharing with you some of our deepest, darkest, most coveted email marketing secrets. And by the way, in case you've never met before, my name is Keala Kanae. I went from working in a coffee shop like this for minimum wage to building a business that's done over $100 million in revenue. And I only say that so that you know that everything I share on my channel comes from real world knowledge that I've learned and applied to get those results, which I share here in hopes that they help you get similar results as well. So make sure you subscribe and hit that little bell notification so you get notified every week when I drop more content like this, and watch this next video in the lineup. I'll see you there.